I should have known by the way no one looked up when I walked in. There was music soft and precise, like everything else in this house, measured, curated, designed to impress. I stood near the entrance a little too long, pretending to fix my sleeve, hoping someone might say something. Aunt Linda glanced my way and smiled, but it was the kind of smile people give when they spot a stranger they're not sure they recognize. The name cards were already placed, white with gold trim, same calligraphy they'd used since the anniversary gala in '09. I checked twice. No Vivian Hayes, just Ethan, Rick, Margaret, and a row of distant cousins who hadn't shown up to a single board meeting. The only empty seat sat beside the kitchen doors. No name, no centerpiece, just a folded napkin creased wrong. "Didn't know you'd be here," Maggie said, brushing past with a tray of champagne flutes. I didn't answer. She didn't wait. From across the room, Rick tapped his wine glass with the base of a pen. "Tonight's not just about tradition," he said. "It's about legacy." His voice still had that boardroom polish, warm, persuasive, absent of weight. My chair was cold, the kind that creaks only when you shift in discomfort. I folded my hands in my lap, palms pressed tight to stop the trembling. "We've decided to allocate the family trust," he continued, "to Ethan. He's earned it. He carries the Hayes name into the future." Applause, long enough to feel deliberate. Someone clapped behind me, quick, eager, probably one of the interns Ethan hired for PR. I didn't move. My jaw ached from holding still. A gold-rimmed envelope slid onto my plate. I looked up. "Something small," Maggie said, symbolic. Inside was a check solidarity, written in fountain pen. Void scrawled diagonally. Below, one word. "Congratulations." I folded it neatly and returned it to the envelope. My fingers brushed the embossed seal on the back, 2 overlapping H's. Rick raised his glass. "To Ethan," he said. "Our future." I didn't lift mine. The stem left a faint ring on the table. I watched it expand and fade slowly, like breath on glass. Nobody noticed. I was already fading. And still, I stayed seated. Not because there was a place for me, but because leaving would have made it official. I chose to disappear quietly. At least that part I could control. I used to think effort counted. When Grandpa passed, I was the one who stayed late after the service. Ethan flew back to Boston before the catering trays were cleared. Rick handed me a box of binders, decades of ledgers, unfiled contracts, handwritten notes on napkins, and said, "You're good with numbers. Make it clean." I spent 2 summers rebuilding the foundation meeting with lawyers, redrafting bylaws, reconciling account histories that no one else understood. No one offered to help. I told myself that meant they trusted me. At 26, I signed every compliance report. I memorized tax law. I missed 2 birthdays when I submitted the final restructure plan. Rick nodded once. "Efficient," he said. "Ethan should take over next quarter." I remember standing in the hallway outside his study, holding the last page of the document I had written my name in the footer, typed but unseen. Once at a brunch, I brought homemade scones. Ethan brought a girl who worked in real estate. Maggie looked across the table and said, "She's polished. You should let her help you dress." I didn't wear that navy blouse again. I used to send birthday cards, handwritten, always mailed early. Once I left a book for Ethan on the porch with a note, "Heard you liked this author." It was still there 3 weeks later, sun-warped, water-stained. Rick once told a donor, "My daughter's very capable. She just doesn't quite understand public leadership." Then he poured a drink and asked Ethan to draft the next press release. I learned not to interrupt, not to bring up wins. I filed away every minor accomplishment, like someone folding clothes no one would wear. When the board celebrated its 10-year milestone, the slideshow began with a photo of the original team Ethan, Rick, and 3 others. My face was in the background, half-turned, blurred. No one said anything. I didn't either. Maggie once pulled me aside during a fundraiser. "You do good work," she said, smoothing a wrinkle on my sleeve. "But some people just don't fit the stage lights," I nodded. Not because I agreed, because I didn't want to make her uncomfortable. I used to think maybe one day they'd notice. Now, I wonder if they already had and simply chose not to. I never knew how much space could shrink around a name not spoken. At 12, I waited at the end of the table, a paper hat slipping sideways on my head. The birthday banner read, "Happy Birthday, Ethan," in bold blue letters. No second name. No cake with my favorite flavor, just a leftover corner slice and 1 plastic fork. Maggie placed it down and said, "You already had yours in June. There was no party in June." At college graduation, I stood 3 feet from her, while Ethan posed for pictures in his cap and gown. She fixed. His collar stepped back and smiled, like she'd seen something rare. He looks like someone they'd put on a magazine cover. I held my own diploma under one arm, watching the corner bend slightly from the weight. The first fundraising gala for the foundation used gold-accented place cards and a projected slideshow. Under the title Founders, the names read, Rick Hayes, Ethan Hayes, Family of Vision. I stood behind the donor table, adjusting name tags for volunteers. A man from the city council offered his hand. "You must be part of the events team." Rick passed behind us and added, "She's always been good with logistics." I kept my smile measured and brief. There was a folder I once carried to every meeting, creased at the edges, pages flagged with colored tabs. One of them held my original pitch for the legacy arm. I found it months later in the copy room's recycle bin, still bound, still unread. Rick once turned to Ethan after a long donor lunch. "You've got presents," he said. "You walk into a room, and people remember." That same day I signed 3 checks for event vendors and wiped ink off the corner of the conference table with my sleeve. The day before the gala, I handed Maggie a revised floor plan. She skimmed it and muttered, "Too much space near the front stage. You don't want people thinking the room's empty." I nodded, then erased the placeholder where I had marked my own seat. Years later, I still caught myself standing straighter when Rick entered a room. Even if I had nothing to say, even if he never looked my way. Sitting now in the chair without a nameplate, I let my hands rest still. The edges of my nails had faint crescent moons from where I'd pressed too hard. Sometimes it isn't the wound that hurts, it's how familiar it starts to feel. I don't remember when I stopped hoping for fairness, only that it didn't happen all at once. Near the terrace, Rick stood beneath the string lights, glass raised. His voice carried easily even over the low music. "From this day forward, we're proud to rename the fund, the Ethan Hayes Foundation." Someone clapped before he even finished. The applause swelled, then settled into scattered cheers. I didn't move. My glass left a faint ring on the railing where I'd set it down. A neighbor I barely recognized touched my arm lightly. "You must be proud of your brother. Not everyone gets to carry a family name like that." I gave a smile too practiced to crack. My fingers curled inward, pressing against the silk lining of my coat. Rick's face looked younger in that moment. Approval always gave him that glow, especially when it came from people who didn't know the details. Behind me, someone approached. Rachel Duncan, last I'd heard, had left the firm. She didn't say anything, just pressed a cream envelope into my hand. No name, no seal. I slipped it into my coat pocket without looking. Later, near the edge of the lawn, I opened it. Inside donation ledgers bearing my signature. articles of formation, the original charter, my handwriting on a cover memo. Paper slightly curled at the corners, pages that had travelled too many hands but not enough eyes. No announcement had been made. No call. No revocation. Just deletion. Rick once told me over coffee, "Vivian, you take things too personally. Legacy is bigger than one person." His cup left a ring on the folder between us. I wiped it away before standing up. I read the documents twice, not to understand them, only to accept that I wasn't confused. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a misprint. It was intentional. From a distance, I could still hear laughter. Ethan's voice lifted just enough to be audible, but not arrogant, the kind of tone Rick used to say he admired. He knows how to read a room. I folded the documents carefully, aligning the edges, smoothing the crease with my thumb. There was no storm inside me. No boiling point. Just stillness. And in that stillness, a sentence I didn't speak aloud. They didn't forget me. They erased me on purpose. I used to rehearse what I'd say, just in case anyone ever asked me why I stopped showing up. There was no need. No one followed when I stepped off the lawn. No one called after me, not even out of habit. The gravel path leading away from the house was uneven near the gate. I noticed a hairline crack in my heel as I walked. I didn't stop to adjust it. The inside of my coat smelled faintly of lavender, like the drawer sachets Rose used to tuck into linen cabinets. I pressed the envelope from Rachel flat against my chest pocket to keep it from folding. I didn't go back to my place. I didn't want to sit on a couch I'd paid for with hours no one remembered. Instead, I walked to the back entrance of Rose's apartment, the one with the sticking door. The light above it flickered once and stayed on. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't offer tea. There was a box on the table, thin wood brass clasp no label. She pushed it forward with 2 fingers, then turned back to her chair. I undid the latch slowly. Inside, a folded contract yellowed at the edges, and a USB drive with a single word handwritten in ink recording. The pen had skipped slightly on the D, like the stroke had hesitated. I ran my thumb over it once, then placed both items in my lap. Rick's voice came back to me in flashes, boardroom cadence, half warm, half dismissive. "You don't have the weight to carry this." Then another time over dinner. "You're smart, sure, but not strategic. There's a difference." I unfolded the contract. The corner caught a splinter from the table edge. I didn't smooth it. The document was signed, his name, then my grandfather's initials. I didn't read the full paragraphs. I didn't need to. I knew what they meant. Not potential. Not permission. Transfer. My hand rested on the paper, not pressing just there. The skin near my knuckles looked dry under the lamplight. I hadn't noticed that before. Rose didn't look at me. She sat quietly as if we were both visitors. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. And for once, the silence wasn't a punishment. It was a decision. Mine. I didn't realize how loud manufactured peace could be until I heard the old refrigerator click in the middle of the night. The apartment creaks, in places I didn't expect floorboards under the kitchen table. The corner cabinet door that never quite latches the baseboard heater that groans like it remembers winter even when it's warm. Rose keeps her curtains drawn halfway just enough to let the light in without giving too much away. I sleep in the guest room, though the mattress sags and the lamp flickers when I plug in my phone. I don't unpack fully. I place my folded sweaters on a chair instead of drawers. It feels temporary, even if no one has said how long I'll stay. The box of documents she gave me sits untouched under the desk. I placed a folded dish towel on top, to keep the lid from curling, not to hide it, just to quiet it. Each morning I boil water for coffee, even though I don't always drink it. I like the sound the kettle makes when it starts to hum, the way the steam curls into the ceiling. I wipe the counters even when they're already clean, just to watch something become simpler. I found the chair at a small shop off the main road. Raw pine. No varnish, no cushion. A single splinter stuck in the side rail which I didn't sand out. The man behind the counter asked if I wanted it gift-wrapped. I said no. He didn't ask why. I carried it home myself, arms aching halfway up the block. I placed it on the porch facing east, though there's no real view, just a chain-link fence and some uneven grass. I sit there after breakfast, holding my coffee cup, even when it's empty. Rick's voice echoes sometimes in the stillness. Vivian, you overthink things. And Maggie's clipped as a button. You've always been too internal. I used to answer them even silently. Now, I just let the words pass. The chair wobbles a little if I shift my weight. I never try to fix it. I don't know what I'll do with the papers. I don't know what happens next. But no one's asking for anything. No one's watching the door. No one's waiting for me to act grateful for being allowed to sit. And for the first time in a long time, I don't feel like I'm in someone else's seat. This one, imperfect as it is, I chose it. Some messages don't need punctuation to sound like warnings. The first came from Ethan. No greeting. Just, do you still have the originals? The second hours later from Maggie. Let's not escalate this into something legal. Neither asked how I was, or where, or why I left in the first place. I stared at the screen for a while, thumb hovering over the reply bar, then turned the phone face down and left it on the windowsill. The smudge of my fingerprint blurred the corner of the glass. 3 days passed. Then a letter arrived not from them, but from Stanton and Mercer, the family's long-standing financial liaison. Bill Stanton's handwriting was still precise, still impersonal. He'd always used a blue ink fountain pen that smelled faintly of lacquer. The letter asked for clarification on my intentions regarding the Hayes endowment in light of recent confusion surrounding authorship and naming rights. A neutral phrase. Phrased, I assume, to keep the firm from appearing complicit. Rick never used intermediaries when he was proud, only when he needed plausible distance. I opened my desk drawer, pulled out a sheet of plain stationery, no letterhead, no watermark, and wrote a single sentence in black ink. I'm not interested in renegotiating what was never offered as a negotiation. No signature. No closing line. I folded it one sharp crease and sealed it without perfume or return address. That was the last I gave them. I sat on the porch afterward, mug half full, the rim chipped slightly from where I'd dropped it weeks ago. I hadn't thrown it away. I didn't see the point. Rick's voice once echoed through a conference call, long before any of this became personal. Vivian's too close to the work. She doesn't know how to step back. He wasn't wrong. I stayed too long in rooms I was never really invited into. I mistook silence for permission. I kept trying to belong by making myself useful. Not this time. They didn't return because they remembered me. They returned because forgetting me had consequences. And this time I didn't move to make it easier for them. Not out of pride, not out of anger, just out of clarity. Some doors don't need to be slammed. They only need to be locked. There's something unspoken in a room when no one expects you to prove you belong. The office is small 3 desks, one copier that smudges the bottom line of every 3rd page, and a coffee pot that groans louder than it brews. I file intake forms and answer phones that ring unevenly. The receptionist left a post-it on my drawer that says, "Thanks, V." I didn't correct her spelling. The air smells like legal pads and instant soup. I don't mind. The work isn't important in a press release kind of way, but it matters to someone, and no one asks for a last name before trusting me with their story. At home, I fixed the leg on Rose's old writing desk. The left side wobbled, so I used a folded coaster and wood glue. When it dried, I didn't test it. I let the floor stay hidden and whole. She asked once while folding towels if I planned to sue. Not with curiosity, more like a nudge across a chessboard she no longer plays. I folded the last towel and placed it in the drawer before answering. "I don't need revenge," I said, "but I won't let them edit the past. There's a file on my computer now, untitled but bookmarked. It holds the first outlines of something I haven't named yet. Not a foundation, not a statement, just a space. One where usefulness isn't a condition for being seen." I changed my mailing address, took my name off the old correspondence. The new forms came in brown envelopes, unmarked, impersonal, refreshingly blank. Maggie once told me during a wedding toast that I was reliable in a quiet way. Then she raised her glass and thanked Ethan for carrying the Hayes name so boldly. I remember holding my fork too tightly. The mark it left on my palm looked like a thin silver bruise. Now, I start each morning the same. I boil water. I carry the mug outside. I sit in the chair I bought myself. The wood is weathering along the edges, turning a softer color. Sometimes I read. Sometimes I don't. The porch doesn't require performance. It doesn't ask who I am or why I'm alone. And that, I think, is what being new feels like. Not louder, just clearer. A voice you stop offering to rooms that never listened. I used to think closure required confrontation. Now, I understand it only needs a decision that no one else gets to revise. The envelope wasn't thick, just a standard letter size, cream-colored, with a single crease running unevenly down the center. I placed the printed transcript inside, folded once. The words were already familiar, Rick calmly admitting to the change, his tone matter-of-fact, as if legal erasure were routine. No explanation, no commentary, just a sentence in blue ink across the top margin. "I'm not keeping this. I'm just refusing to lose it again." I addressed it to Ethan's office, not his home. I didn't trust the quiet of their hallway. The next morning, I brought the rest of the papers to Whitlow and Black. The receptionist recognized my name, but didn't know where to look when I handed over the file. I didn't stay long. Just a signature, a timestamp, and a box sealed with 2 strips of brown tape. The building smelled like wood polish and overwatered plants. I noticed a stain on the ceiling above the reception desk, water damage irregular, shaped like a country I couldn't name. I stared at it longer than I meant to. At home, I climbed the stepladder and took down the photograph from Rose's hallway. The frame was brass, the glass slightly smudged from years of being passed. In the photo, we were arranged in rows, Rick standing tall in the center, Maggie's hand on Ethan's shoulder, mine tucked at the edge. I looked like a guest who didn't want to block the view. I wrapped it in tissue paper, placed it in a plain cardboard box, and added a note on the outside in pencil, not to forget. Just to store properly. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel emptied. Just still. There's a difference between giving up and stepping away from a rigged game. I no longer needed to memorize the rules. Maggie once told me during a phone call years ago, "You always carry too much weight for things that aren't really yours." She was right, in a way. But the weight wasn't the problem. It was where I kept trying to set it down. Now I've cleared the table. No one else has to make room for me. I don't need their space. I just need my own place to stand, and the certainty that it doesn't come with strings. I no longer reach for explanations that never arrive. The kettle clicks off by itself. I let the mint leaves steep longer than I used to, resting the ceramic pot on the table. I sanded by hand, uneven in corners but steady. The grain still holds the scent of linseed oil and thyme. Outside, the chair on the porch remains where I placed it. A second one sits beside it, now plain, unfinished wood. No one has asked about it, and I haven't explained. It's not a seat I keep empty for hope. It's a placeholder for kindness, for memory, for the space I was once told didn't exist. The floor creaks underfoot. The wind taps at the blinds. Sunlight doesn't demand applause, it just returns. No alerts buzz from my phone. No texts from Maggie. No masked concern forwarded through lawyers or banks. Silence used to sting. Now it just means no one is rewriting my name this morning. I walk barefoot to the old dresser in Rose's room. The drawer glides open slowly, the wood catching at the corner like it always has. Her letter lies folded between a book of pressed flowers and an empty glasses case. Only a few lines in her handwriting. Familiar, slanted, careful, don't build walls, Vivian. Build doors, even if no one walks through. I place it in a frame without glass, tuck it beside the window where the light can reach it, but not fade it. It isn't for guests. It isn't decoration. It's a rule I now live by. I planted zinnias along the fence last week, fixed the latch on the side gate. On Thursdays, I sit with a boy named Marcus and show him how to track expenses in a notebook. He forgets decimals, but he never stops trying. There are no headlines, no donors, no speeches, but each morning I put on the same cardigan, pour 2 cups of tea, one for me, one for the chair beside me, and take a breath. Rick once told me, "No one likes a woman who takes up space without offering something first." I offer nothing now. I simply stay. And when I look toward the rising sun, I don't think of what was taken. I think only this. I don't need a place at their table anymore. This seat right here is enough.